Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so glad to have you join us today for our emergency preparedness webinar. We're very, very happy to have you all in attendance. We have an overwhelming amount of participants and attendees for this particular presentation, and we're so thankful and grateful to have you all join us for our Emergency Preparedness for Older Adults and People with Disabilities presentation. My name is Dr. Nakia Theory, and I am the branch chief here at CDA, California Department of Aging, and I oversee our Older Adult Program branch. And I'm joined by Anna Acton from Department of Rehabilitation and Vance Taylor from Cal OES and Sydney Schillinger from Department of Aging as well. Very, very happy to have you all in attendance. We are excited. We're excited to have you all join us, especially as we transition out of September, being National Preparedness Month. We are excited to discuss our collaborative efforts, and we're also excited to introduce our emergency preparedness guide to everyone. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all to the California Department of Aging Deputy Director, Denise Leiker. She would like to present you all and welcome you to our meeting today. Thank you. Denise?
Thank you, Nakia. Good afternoon, everybody. As you can tell, we are very excited to be able to roll out this new tool that really focuses on two very important populations here in California, helping our older adults and persons living with disabilities be able to be prepared for emergencies, as we know that are far too commonly happening across the world, our nation, and even within our state. We already know that we're in fire season here in California, which seems to be a regular occurring event. And we also know that there are other things that could easily get in the road for those that we care about the most, who need to have a plan in place in order for them to reach safety and be able to be guided through any kind of emergency, from local to larger scale across our state. So it is really exciting that the California Department of Aging can bring us all together today. And with our wonderful panel and our partnerships with our Department of Rehabilitation and our Office of Emergency Services, we hope that this will be another tool in your toolbox as you work with the communities that you serve and the individuals that need your guidance the most. And so without further ado, I want to thank our team and thank everybody that's contributed to getting us to today. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Theory to move us into the content so that you all can get introduced to the new guide, some of our tips, and how you too can take advantage of using this with those that you work with. Welcome, everyone.
Wonderful, Denise. Thank you so much. Once again, thank you all for joining us. We're now going to go into our presentation. So I'm going to be introducing each of our panelists, and they will then give you some information about themselves as well as each of the departments that they serve in. And then as we move forward within our presentation, we're going to be discussing our collaborative efforts, and we're also going to talk about best practices, as well as, of course, introducing our emergency preparedness guide that we have worked diligently on and collaborated on. So first, I'm going to be introducing, next slide, please, Cindy. I'm going to be introducing you all to Sydney Schillinger. Sydney is our Senior Emergency Services Coordinator with the California Department of Aging. We're very happy to have Sydney as a part of our team, and Sydney is going to provide you with an overview and information about California Department of Aging and our efforts in supporting emergency services and emergency management. Sydney?
Yeah, good afternoon, guys. I am so excited to be here today to introduce our emergency preparedness guide as really just, and also what California Department of Aging has been doing to support older adults and those with disabilities during a disaster. So on a high level, CDA has been very focused on building those partnerships before, during, and after a disaster. And that's going to include at the state level with partnerships like we see here today with the Department of Rehabilitation and with the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services with this guide, as well as with, as Vance will probably talk about, the Priority Population Task Force and other things of that nature. With our local partners, we are very much focused on supporting them with their emergency preparedness, making sure that they're building those partnerships at a local level. And that's going to include, we're working on quarterly meetings with our local partners, highlighting new emergency management practices, as well as programs with different state partners that they might not know about, and highlighting those things that might be beneficial to our older adult communities for our local areas on aging, our adult day healthcare centers, as well as any of our other partners that we have here at CDA. We are also focused on building successful emergency preparedness plans and doing things of that nature. In general, CDA is really focused on strengthening our partnerships and our knowledge, both at the state level and at the local level, so that we can support older adults and those with disabilities before, during, and after a disaster. So with that, I wanted to introduce Anna from DOR to kind of highlight what they are working on as well.
Thank you so much, Sydney. Welcome, everyone. I see some familiar names and some new names in the audience, and I really appreciate your time today. So my name is Anna Acton. I'm the Deputy Director for the Independent Living and Community Access Division at the Department of Rehabilitation. We are the largest vocational rehabilitation and independent living program in the nation. We have some 70, almost 80 offices throughout the state, providing employment support to people with disabilities, and we work with a wonderful network of disability organizations and providers that are on the local ground level supporting people with disabilities in their community of choice. We work with 28 independent living centers. I see some of you here throughout the state. These independent living centers have really leaned forward into disaster preparedness, response, and recovery efforts at that local level. They have ramped up their engagement with local emergency managers, and they work directly with individuals with disabilities to ensure that they're prepared for disasters and help them in their resiliency if a disaster does occur in their local area. We have a network of traumatic brain injury providers, a statewide assistive technology program that becomes critical in ensuring assistive devices, durable medical equipment is available to individuals who live in the community. And we have an older individuals who are blind program that we work with as well. So here at the Department of Rehabilitation, we work closely with other departments, such as California Office of Emergency Services, the California Health and Human Services, and other departments throughout the state to ensure people with disabilities, those with access and functional needs, are integrated into all levels of planning for the state in disaster, to plan for disasters and in response and in those recovery efforts. We work on state plans, whether it's heat waves or droughts or others, to ensure people with disabilities are integrated into those plans. We work closely with our state departments when disasters occur to ensure we are working with our local partners to identify unmet needs and ensure that when those local community partners need support from the state, that we're here to help support that. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Sydney.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And with that, I will actually introduce our last panelist, which is Vance Taylor from not from CDA, from the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services.
Thanks, Sydney. I appreciate it, and glad to be participating on the panel. Definitely got a great turnout here. I always think that's impressive. I think anytime we're dealing with anything online, we're competing with Netflix. So the fact that you're here, this is a good thing. Cali has, it's really proud to be uh, sort of the tip of the spear on the mission of inclusive emergency management. It's not at all lost on us that anytime there's a disaster, it's older adults, it's people with disabilities, it's anybody that doesn't access or functional need that gets hit the hardest before, during, and after that event. And so as we look at how do we address that in a meaningful way, the state leaned forward. The governor created an Office of Access and Functional Needs. And really, as chief, my role is to implement a two-part mission. The first part is to identify what are the needs that all Californians have before, during, and after disasters. And then secondly is to work in partnership, not just with emergency managers, but actually with the community to ensure that we're identifying and addressing and integrating those needs throughout the entire disaster landscape. And that, of course, means the way we plan, the way we prepare, the way we respond, and the way we recover. So I'm really proud to be able to serve in this capacity, and really, really glad that it enables me the great opportunity to partner with people like Anna and like Sydney and Dr. Theory and our other state agency and CBO partners. So appreciate being here. Glad to have the discussion. Back to you, Sydney.
Thank you so much, Vance, and thank you to Sydney and Anna as well. As you can tell, between the three of them, we have a wealth of knowledge with our panelists and with each of our departments that we serve in. So looking forward to the remaining of the presentation, where we will now transition into discussing emergency management and how it's evolved to include the whole community. And so Vance will get us started with this particular discussion. So I'm going to cue you back in, Vance. Thank you.
All right, Tag, I'm in. For me, this conversation really comes down to sort of perspective and planning. That historically, there's been a challenge when it comes to perspective. And it's that we haven't had enough people with different lived experiences at the table to really get the value and benefit of everybody's perspective. I always talk about the fact that I use a power wheelchair. So for me, having spent most of my life using a power wheelchair, anytime I go somewhere, I'm looking for access, right? Am I going to be able to get around? Is there something impeding my path of travel? Is there a step or a ramp or an elevator? But if people come into that same place with me and maybe they run, skip, walk, or jump, probably they're not going to be looking for access in the same way. And it's not that one is good and the other is bad. It just simply means that based on our lived experiences, we each have our own perspective. And so we can look at the same thing and see it differently. And so that led to our challenge when it came to our planning process. That what you had a lot of times were really well-intentioned individuals who wanted to do really good things and help a lot of people. But because they didn't have the perspective of somebody with lived experience, they would look at an issue and they wouldn't see the same barriers or challenges or obstacles that someone from the community might have. So that is everything from, hey, there's a press conference, but if there's no interpreter, then people who are deaf aren't going to get life-saving information. If we're not posting things in accessible formats, people who are blind or have low vision can't access that information. If we're only putting things out in English, then entire swaths of the population are going to know what's coming, how to prepare, where to go for safety. If we look at evacuation, it's great to say, hey, everybody get out and be safe. We'll send school buses, but if we're not sending buses with accessible ramps, lifts, and transportation services, then not everybody's going to be able to utilize those services. If we're setting up shelters and they're not physically accessible, or they don't have full accessible wraparound services, right? Meaning that if somebody shows up and they don't have their support network, there's nobody there to help them with feeding or toileting or transferring in and out of a cot, then people will go to that shelter and not have their needs met. And if we don't plan for these things, then we can expect that when the moment of crisis occurs, that we'll be in a position to do something meaningful there. So as we kind of coalesce around this issue of perspective and planning, where we landed is with what I think is a really beautiful recognition, which is that this issue is bigger than any one individual or agency or organization. But in reality, it takes the whole community in order to ensure the success of everyone here. And so we partner not just with other government agencies through like a priority population task force, we also partner with community-based organizations, independent living centers, regional centers, the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, the AAAs, all these different groups working together, not just to help government stretch, but also to build individual capability and capacity. And so when we look at something like this guide, it's all of us looking at what can we do to help individuals be empowered with the information, the tools, and the resources to be better prepared so that when disasters strike, and they will come, they can maintain their health, their safety, their security, and their independence. And that's what we mean when we talk about emergency management evolving to include the whole community. It's that recognition that it's a for us by us, planning with us, not for us. We're all going to fail or succeed, but we'll do it together kind of mentality.
Thank you so much, Vance. Absolutely. Everything that you've said is echoing true with all of us. And this is why it was so important for us to come together in developing this guide that we are now going to go into introducing you all to. So I'm going to now go to Anna, who will get us started with the introduction of the guide. Anna?
Thank you so much. So personal preparedness is such an important conversation to have. It's an important conversation to have, in the work that you do with your family members, your friends, your neighbors. So I've had the honor of working at the local level with emergency planners, response systems, and individuals, right, during disasters. And I've seen firsthand the impact that disasters have on people with disabilities. And we see time and time again, right, that when major disasters occur, it is people with disabilities, older adults, individuals who need additional assistance maybe during a disaster that are disproportionately impacted, meaning they're likely, we see that, to be a victim of a disaster and to be impacted. And so that is really why this has become such a personal kind of important topic for me and the work that I've done, both at the local level and here at the state. I am a person with a disability as well. I use a wheelchair. I also have diabetes. And so there are many different considerations for me when it comes to disasters. On a personal level as well, it was when the year I was born, my family lives in a very rural part, and I still live in a very rural part of California where we have a lot of wildfires. And the year I was born, our family home and property was burned in a wildfire. And so I've lived my entire life looking at the horizon during the summer when it's fire season, and being just very aware of if there's any smoke, and to get the information I need to make sure I know where it is, what's happening, so that I can prepare and respond appropriately. So at the state level here, it's really been wonderful to see the level of support we do on statewide planning, right? On different disasters and supporting our local partners. Remember, when disasters occur, we rely on local offices of emergency services, volunteer and paid fire departments, volunteer disaster workers, law enforcement. And when disasters get big enough, right, then the state steps in to help support those local level, whether it's Cal Fire and response to wildfires, Cal OES, and then on the national level, FEMA, right, when things get larger. It really does take kind of a whole government approach, is what I've really learned working for the state for the last few years, on making sure that we're assisting our local communities when disasters occur. The one thing I've also learned with this is when a major disaster occurs, there's only so many local disaster response individuals available. I mean, think about the number of local fire department personnel you might have, or law enforcement, or others, right, that might be available. And when you look at the number of people with access and functional needs, older adults, people with disabilities, right, you quickly see that no matter how much planning we do at the local level, state level, or nationally, right, there's this personal preparedness piece that will help us with our personal resiliency. So we put together this guide that we hope that you can use for yourself and for the individuals you might work with, your friends, your neighbors. We actually leverage people with lived experience. You're going to see in this guide that we have topics by disability, right? Or access and functional needs. We worked with individuals who are deaf to look at this guide and give their best tips, right? People with physical disabilities, mental health disabilities, and others. Is it perfect? No. Is it going to work everything for everyone? No, but this is where the conversation starts. You use it as a guide to really think through what you're going to need individually, or the people that you work with, they're going to need individually. So with that, it becomes critical, right, to think about and have the conversations. The best thing you can do is start having the conversations about personal preparedness. So we're going to go over each section. And Sydney.
Vance is going to go first.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to talk about alerts and things of that nature.
All right. So, the reality is this: information's power, right? If we don't know what's coming, then we don't know how to prepare. If we're not able to access information that tells us the specific steps we need to take to be healthy and safe and secure, then we can't expect that we're going to have a good outcome once disasters strike. Now, some events are what we call no notice events, right? An earthquake strikes, it's not a lot of advance warning on that front. You can get a few moments or seconds of notification through like the Shake Alert app, but there's not a lot of notice on that. Other events like wildfires can be quick, or sometimes we see these coming in advance. And other events like storms, atmospheric rivers, of course, we've got things like Doppler radar, so we get a good, I think, amount of advance notice. But in all those instances, if you're not signed up to receive emergency alerts, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. You can't expect that, especially if you require additional support or assistance, that you're going to be able to just get up and run. So the way I explain it is this: if an emergency alert comes through, it might take me time to contact a care attendant, to pack up my durable medical equipment, to make sure I have accessible transportation, maybe through paratransit. In other words, it's going to take me more time to evacuate than maybe my next door neighbor, who just gets an alert, throws a bag in her car, and heads out in her car. But if I don't get that alert at all, the likelihood I'm going to be safe or secure goes down drastically. So if you go to calalerts.org, you can sign up for local emergency alerts for free. If you download the MyShake app, you can get advanced notification on earthquakes, again, for free. If you go through, even through whatever news outlet you subscribe to, you can sign up for emergency alerts. But you've got to have them. They'll come through in accessible formats, and that information will not just help you reduce suffering, but it could very well save your life.
All right, awesome. So one of the other things we're going to talk about in this guide is the Vial of Life. For those who don't know, a Vial of Life is basically a document that holds crucial medical information about you yourself or the person you're caring for. Inside, you'll find information about allergies, medication, medical condition, emergency contacts, and any other information that first responders might need. This is especially important for our seniors, those with chronic illnesses, and anyone who might have a lot of medications as well. In the chaos of an emergency, it's important to have this information readily available to ensure that medical personnel can make informed decisions quickly. And one of the great things about our personal preparedness guide is the last page is actually a Vial of Life. And so it's perfect. You can print it out, or if you have the paper copy, you can rip it off and you can put it on your fridge. And so that's kind of what we were going to talk about next, is where to keep it. It's essential to keep it in a location that is easily accessible. And the most common place, as I said, is to kind of store it on your fridge, because most people will check for that in an emergency. Additionally, consider keeping a digital version on your phone or in a secure app, making it accessible if you're away from home. A Vial of Life is really important because it empowers you to communicate vital information when you are unable to speak for yourself. It is a proactive step that you can take to ensure your safety and well-being, as well as that for your loved ones. So we just really wanted to highlight this part of the guide so that you know what it is and how it can support you in your personal preparedness steps. And so next we were going to talk about making an evacuation plan and how to plan for your needs. Vance?
Yeah, thank you. So, if an emergency strikes, chances are you might have to evacuate. And you can't just snap your fingers and make that happen. You've got to have a plan in place. As much as government will stretch and will try to make sure that there's accessible transportation services available, you really have to do the best you can to put your own plans in place. And so the sort of rule of thumb that I always tell people is come up with a list of four people that you can count on in your support network that could support you with your evacuation if it came down to it. I have a pretty easy list. Number one is my wife. She's a fan right? Assuming that I remember to bring flowers sometime, she's probably going to help me out. Uh, my mom lives in the town next to us, so she's on my list. You know, we had 9 good months together in the womb, so probably she's going to support me as well. Uh, I've got a friend from church and a colleague at work. Now, I can't expect that any one of those individuals is going to be available 24/7. But one of those 4 people will likely be available to support me if needed. And so it's all about planning and making backup plans and making backups to our backups. But if I don't talk to those people about, hey, these are my needs, can I count on you for support? This is what that looks like. And have that all set up, then I can't expect that I can pull it together on a moment's notice. And so we just make a plan. And it doesn't have to be scary. And it doesn't have to be expensive. And it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It's just a conversation with people you know and trust and who have your best interest in mind. So make an evacuation plan, plan for your needs, and make sure that you've got things set up today so you can be safe tomorrow.
Thank you, Vance. And I'm going to add to it. I mean, the having the 4 individuals is so critical. If one of them, it's really good to have as a neighbor, someone who lives close by. Family is always good, but think about, is there someone in the neighborhood that might be of assistance? And remember, the time to have the conversations with people is today, right? It helps us connect. It helps us be familiar with each other so that when a disaster does occur, right, we know who to reach out to who might need assistance in the neighborhood or in the community, and vice versa. They will know, you know, to check on you if something occurs. It's always important to follow directions of the local police when evacuating. So just to kind of put that out front. But evacuate early is one of the biggest tips that we can give here, because especially if you need extra time and due to disability, due to being an older adult, you know, if you see a warning, that's the time to start preparing to leave versus when it's mandatory, right? So if there's ever an opportunity with a warning, take that if you need extra time to prepare. Not all of us, right, have good access to transportation. Some of us don't drive. Sometimes that's due to aging. We might lose our license over time, or maybe due to disability. We just have never driven. So we really important to think about what the transportation options are if you need to evacuate, and have conversations, right? Again, whether it's a family member, a friend, a neighbor, maybe it is your local paratransit provider, right? Reach out to them, have the conversation. I think, you know, our local transportation providers, you know, law enforcement, they love to have these conversations early, right? Not when the disaster's happening, but really think through this. Have the conversations. What happens when a disaster occurs? Will there be an opportunity to get evacuated if I have a power chair? What will that look like if I need to leave quickly, or if I have more time to leave and can plan? Have the conversations and talk through it, right? Again, with friends, with family, with neighbors, with coworkers, with whoever is willing to have that conversation with your local service providers. I think the other piece I kind of wanted to talk about is know your routes in and out of where you live, whether you live in a rural area, whether you live in suburbs or very kind of urban area. Know the roads. And when I say know the roads, look at them in a map, right? Get to know them, but drive them, drive with someone. We have, again, I live in a very rural area. We have friends that get together and they go and drive roads they don't know that are evacuation routes, right? They go and we'll have a picnic and drive areas so it's not during a disaster. Because remember, if there's a wildfire, for example, that could be very smoky, it could be very hard to see things. And if you're trying to evacuate down a road a route that you have never done before, it's going to make it even more difficult when you're under pressure, right? So get to know your community, get to know the roads in and out, get to know those evacuation. My other tip, always, I don't care where you live, if you do have your own vehicle, always keep a half tank or more. And I know that can be hard because some of us are living on very fixed incomes, right? But, try to keep that tank full because you never know how long it might take to evacuate. You might be sitting on the roads for a very long time, and you're going to want as full of a tank as possible. And then there's so much more here, but I'm going to just stop there and say, really then, what are you going to grab when you have to go? And if you have to go quickly versus you have time to plan and evacuate. These are, I think, the next considerations we want to talk about. And Vance, do you want to go to the next?
It's me, actually.
Oh, it's you.
I'm notorious for not having a half a tank of gas.
It's hard.
I know. So what we wanted to talk about here is the difference between a go and a stay box. What's the difference and why they're important? So one of the things that we always talk about is a go bag. So this is going to be your portable kit packed with essential items you might need if you have to evacuate quickly. Just those items that you might need. So water, non-perishable food, a flashlight, a first aid kit, any important documents, as well as any medications you require, or at least a list of medications if you have to evacuate and you don't have them. This is very important so that if you are evacuated to a shelter, that we can get that medication for you at a shelter location if that is needed. If you have anything that's specific for your family needs, such as baby supplies or pet foods, it's good just to keep it. I have mine in my garage, so if I was to head out, I can easily just like pick it up and take it to the back of my car. The key is, again, to have a bag that is ready to grab at a moment's notice so that you can evacuate swiftly and safely if needed. Now, something that I don't think is talked about as much is a stay box. And this is going to be a container of supplies that you will need if you have to shelter in place. If it is too dangerous to evacuate from where you are, or if it is better just to stay versus to try to go, through an evacuation zone or things of that nature. For a severe storm, or if there's a wildfire that is impending a certain area. A stay box is typically going to include similar items, which is going to be your water, food, medical supplies, flashlights, batteries, a battery powered radio, so you can hear all of the emergency notifications that are going on. Because if we are in an area where you are having to shelter in place, there's most likely not going to be electricity. Even having games or activities to keep people spirits high, or just to keep them distracted from the stress of the situation that's happening and on hand. Basically, this is going to be similar to a go box. It can be in the same area where it's just there to keep you safe and comfortable until the situation improves. So these tools are really important because emergencies can strike without warning. We have seen that time and time again with our wildfires in California, and sometimes it can be something as small as an unexpected evacuation due to a local hazard. If a train derails, if there's some sort of contamination on it. So having these go and stay boxes are really good to ensure that you are prepared for any situation that happens in your area. You might not think you are in an area that is highly prone to evacuations or an issue, but you never know when a disaster can strike in your area. And so one of the things that we were going to have Vance and Anna do is highlight some of the things that they have specifically in their go and stay boxes that are important to them, just as things that they have. And so I thought I would pass it along to them.
All right, Anna, I'm dying to know what's in your go bag.
Well, I'm really excited to show you my go bag. Can I just say that? This I actually got at a local independent living center some years back. So I just want to show you real quick because I have my birth certificates, social security cards, like literally like the harder things to replace are in there. I also want to show you, I had mentioned that I have diabetes. I have an insulin pump. So one of the things that I can't get local is my supplies for my insulin pump. So that might be hard to see, but there are some of my supplies. So I have a box of each of the supplies that are needed for that. I also have a wind up radio and flashlight. Okay, that also has a solar power on it. So this is always in there. And then I also will just say two more things real quick. One is that I have backup drives for my computer and my contacts and some important documents. And so I keep that in here as well. And then lastly, medication. So I actually have medication that I keep in here. And one of the tricks that I found with that is in the past, I'd always talk to my doctor about, hey, how do I get some extra supplies? So in case, I have to evacuate, in case the pharmacies aren't available, because we've even seen that happen in some of the larger disasters. Like, what can I do? Well, recently, I went to a 3-month subscription, right? Mail in prescription. So I get 3 months, right, of prescriptions. I put the extra one of the months in the go bag. So if I have to leave, I actually have a month's worth of prescriptions in my go bag. So I don't have to worry about that. Insulin is a little touchy that way. So I hopefully will remember to grab it out of the refrigerator and throw it in there as I go. But those are the kind of things that I make sure are there in my go bag. I also will mention that I've recently started using a power wheelchair. And what I did is on the back of my power chair, I was able to find an extra charge cord and a charger for it. So I put that just attached to the power chair. So if I evacuate, hopefully that will remain with me so I can charge my power chair wherever I go, because I've seen multiple shelter situations where people have evacuated without their equipment, or even if they get their equipment without the power cord charger, which can, create some difficulties. So those are the kind of things I have. What about you, Vance?
Okay, I'm not going to show you my bag. But yeah, and it's funny because some of the things you mentioned I have in my bag as well, which is great. One thing I have are snacks. I'm a big believer, not just in the power of a snack to give you a little bit of a boost energy-wise, but also good for morale. You were talking about an extra charger cord for your wheelchair, and that's huge. The number one thing people forget to bring with them to a shelter is power wheelchair chargers. Can't tell you how many times we've had to make arrangements to bring in power wheelchair chargers. But also a power cord for your smartphone, right? If you've got people in shelters and they're using VRI because they need interpretation services, or they're using like a telephonic translation line, that eats up your battery really quick. So having extra charger cords is like a really good thing. Insurance documents, that's good. And for us, it's a laptop, right? We've got a laptop with a backup hard drive. And I feel like that's sort of the keys to the kingdom. It's got all the info. Not to mention family photos and all that stuff. The last thing that for us, well, for me is really important is I have a very thin air mattress. And it's because if I got to lay out on a standard bed, I have to worry about pressure source. And so I've got an air mattress that I use when I travel. And without that, I'm going to be in a real bad way. So think about those type of things. And I don't actually have this in my go bag, but it's next to my bag is a BiPAP that I use for sleeping. And again, that would put me in a pretty tough spot if I didn't have it. So it's just trying to think about say if I were to go somewhere, like what would I have to have with me? The other thing is, um, don't make it so big that you can't actually haul it.
Mhm.
That's like the number one thing people are like, I'll bring this and that and the other. Okay, great, but you can't take that with you without a U-Haul truck. So think about what you need to have and not what you want to have, um, and then take it from there.
Vance, that's such good tips. And I think, really think about, individuals have to think about what they need on a daily basis. The guide has suggestions based on disability, older adults, caregivers, right? Those are a starting point to think through it, but people know what they use on a daily basis, right? And so really think through, what are those things that make my life comfortable, keep me healthy, and keep me safe. And those are the items. And I just want to mention too that I have the quick go bag that I can grab and put on my lap and go, right? I also have a crate that's like the next step if I have time that I can lift. It's not too big, that has like some really important like family history and photos and things too, that I'd like to have. But really think about what is important to you and your well-being, and those are the items you're going to want to put in the go bag. Another quick tip is, if you have to evacuate, take a video or pictures as you're leaving your home, just in the event that it's flooded or there's a fire and it burns, right? So you have evidence of what was in your home the minute that day when you were leaving. So something that I'm gonna try to do
For
anyways. If there's
sure. One thing that people ask me about on the regular is like fireboxes,
yeah.
right? Like, well, I'll put my stuff in a fireproof safe. And I'll say yes, but yes, it's great to have a fireproof safe, right? Then you can put all your documents in there, you don't have to worry about it. But make sure you check the temperature rating on it, because a lot of them are fireproof, but if they don't have a really high temperature rating on it, all the stuff in there is going to melt. So just something to think about.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for that. We've gotten some great ones here from Kevin about communicating about a designated rallying point, as well as having some small denomination bills. There's been some amazing comments, as well as just things, as you said, you have to think about what works for your disability or what you might need if you do evacuate. You have the general items and then specific ones for yourselves. So what I wanted to talk about is the emergency preparedness guide. So we are going to be having it offered in 6 languages. It's going to be offered in English, Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, and Korean. Currently, the English and Spanish versions are on the CDA website. And additional languages will be up as soon as we get them from the translator. And we are very excited about having this in all of those, in all of the core languages. And we wanted to just say that. So it is on the website. Our local AAAs do have print copies that will be sent to them soon. We are waiting for DGS to print them because they are currently printing all of the election materials. But that is an option if you are wanting printed copies. There are some at the local AAAs, but they do also have a limited amount. So one of the things that we also wanted to talk about is just disseminating this emergency preparedness guide. We really want you to focus on not only sharing it with your current community that you have, those clients, those participants that you have. We really want to share this document as large, as many people as possible. Because the more people that we can get to prepare for a disaster, or the less people, or more people that will be better prepared and able to evacuate on time, have those set things done, have those go bags and stay boxes and things of that nature. So I wanted to just kind of think of like unique partnerships, ways to engage, things that you can think about. I want us to be as creative as possible as we are trying to build those local partnerships that you guys might not have thought about before. One of the things that I think about are like EMTs, because they see a lot of people who sometimes that regularly need assistance to go to hospitals and things of that nature. Sometimes they get called for, like, I think of older adults who are at fall risk or things of that nature, who might need help to prepare for a disaster, who might need that assistance that might not be part of a network yet, to kind of build that bridge so that we can add new clients to our local areas on aging network, so that we can help support those older adults and also those with disabilities. I know it's the same thing with Anna, as well as like Vance, just making sure that we're doing those local community outreaches. Disability advocacy organizations, a lot of them I'm sure you guys are already partnered with, but just sharing this resource so that we can build out, and maybe even local churches or local volunteer organizations, community health clinics, some of these places that you might not have thought about before, sharing this guide, building that relationship that way, building these new partnerships to help our local communities is really something that we are definitely focused on. And I wanted to just say, if you have any last minute questions, you guys can put them in the chat, and we have a couple of minutes to answer some questions live. I know a lot of the questions were about where is the guide, and it is on the CDA website. We have provided the link, and we will also be sending it out after this webinar as well. But we were going to do a couple of questions that have come through, if there are any. So
Well, most of the questions have been answered. We do
okay.
have one attendee right now who has their hand raised, and so I am going to enable that to allow the attendee to ask their question. And this question is from Fran Sarasaris. Hopefully I said that correctly. Fran, I'm going to enable to allow you to talk. Fran, go ahead with your question.
It is here. Hi, good afternoon. This is really interesting, and thank you very much for bringing it out to us. My question is, as I stipulated, I am also in a wheelchair and a commissioner for LA County for Aging and Disabilities. But my quick question is, what sticks in my mind is, if I'm stuck in a building that's 2 or 3, maybe 4 stories high, what is being done to safeguard my being safe to be able to get out of that building in case of a fire or whatever tragedy might happen? Is there anything in the program that stipulates something on this?
I can start, and then maybe Vance, if you want to add to it. It's really important to have the conversation with the property management owner, whoever it is who manages, about what the plan is for individuals. There are evacuation chairs, for example, that can be made available that might help someone with evacuating, but it also really takes having the conversation ahead of time to know who on those floors, who might check in on you, what equipment can be made available to help with that evacuation. I've been in circumstances where we've had to evacuate from upper stories. And I will tell you, when the fire department comes, they're going to come and they're going to take you and they're going to get you out of there. But it's really important, and they may do that without your equipment. So if you have a mobility device, there may not be time. They're going to save life first. Right? So there may not be time to grab the mobility equipment, and depending on the weight of it and the ability to get it out, it can be difficult. So what's best is have those conversations with your neighbors, with the property managers. What's the plan? Who's available? Is there an evacuation chair that could be purchased, or is it already there? Where is it? How do you use it and practice it before an event occurs? Vance, do you have anything else?
Okay, thank you very much. I'll look into that. Appreciate your help.
Thank you, Fran.
Sounds like you summed it up perfect, Anna. Yeah, I will just say that these conversations and these processes sometimes take time, right? If you're talking with, let's say, a property manager, for example, and you're going to have to explain, hey, what's an evacuation chair? Why do we need it? That's going to take time before you get buy-in, a resource gets identified, procured, deployed, that you can provide training, that sort of thing. So start having these conversations now. I think for so long, as a community, we've wanted to avoid having these conversations. It's like, if I don't talk about it, then it'll be okay. I don't have to deal with it. But we're now in this phase of life where we're all going to be impacted by disasters in some way. And so we can not talk about it and suffer the consequences later, or we can choose to empower ourselves and take control of our own narrative, right? We can choose to kind of captain our own ship, so to speak, and feel a sense of confidence knowing that we've got plans in place, we've got systems in place, we've got support in place. And this guide is just a springboard to help get you there. It's not the end all be all, but it's a great starting point. It's got fantastic tips, and it'll start you on your preparedness journey. But yeah, move forward. Do it with your friends, do it with your support network, do it as a whole community, because at the end of the day, it does take all of us, but we each have to do our part.
Thank you so much, Vance. And thank you all for being in attendance for this webinar. We so appreciate it. And we want to give a kudos and a thank you to our panelists today, Sydney, Anna, and Vance. They've worked extremely hard on preparing this presentation for you all. And we've all worked extremely hard on this guide that we're so proud of. And before we end for today, I know we have other questions that are coming in and raised hands. Due to timing, we're not going to be able to address those additional questions today. However, Sydney is going to speak a little more about addressing the questions at a later time, and then also this recording. And I know quite a few of the questions in the chat are pertaining to how to obtain the guide, which Sydney has mentioned already. So again, I just wanted to stop and thank all of you for being in attendance, and thank you to all of our panelists. We had a record number of registrants for this particular webinar, very impressive record number. And so we were very proud of the interest in this webinar and this topic. And myself, I've learned to get my stay bag, my go bag and my stay box prepared, and to have a full tank just in case I need to evacuate. So this was very helpful to me as well. And I'll turn it back over to Sydney again for her to address some of those last minute comments. But again, I just wanted to extend thank you to everyone for attending. To our interpreter, Rex, thank you as well. And to all of our panelists, once again, thank you so much. Sydney, any last words?
Yeah, I was just going to go over just the high level of what's going to come next. So we are going to be sending this recording to our comms team, who will be uploading it to the CDA YouTube page. And when we do that, we will send out an email to everyone who registered for this course. The YouTube link on the webinar that we just did. We will also be providing a link to the guide online. And any questions that were asked that we did not get answered, we will be basically correlating those and answering them for you. I know a lot of questions have been about getting print guides. As we said, we currently have them being shipped out to the local areas on aging. So if you, there are 33 within the state, you are more than welcome to reach out to them as well to see if there are any copies that you can have for your guys' personal use. But yes, so we will work on all of those questions and we will send that out to you in the next couple of weeks. And we are very excited to have you guys all here. And thank you so much for giving an hour of your time to learn more about emergency preparedness.
Thank you so much, Sydney. And again, thank you to Seema as well. Seema is our other Senior Emergency Services Coordinator at the California Department of Aging, who has been answering most of your questions in the chat. So again, thank you everyone for attending and have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful week. Thank you all.